Welcome aboard Trip Boat George this afternoon. We've got John in the middle of the boat there, crewing for us today. And my name's John as well, I'm your skipper this afternoon. Now, just going to run through a brief safety information before we get into the tunnel. You can see we've got life rings arranged around the boat. We've also got fire extinguishers in the middle and first aid kits up here in the back. So with anything should it occur today. But with nice safe trips here, and just to let you know that we are actually regulated by the Maritime Coast Guard Agency. So they check our boats, they check our skippers, make sure that everything is shipshape and Bristol fashion, you might well say. Now just be aware of the upstand around the boat here, the red and green line. Do keep everything you want to take home with you today within the profile of the boat. You can see we're moving into some tight brick-line tunnels here, and we've got a 20-ton boat that doesn't like stopping too fast. So anything that gets caught between the boat and the tunnel is probably not going home today. Now here we go, we're into the first of our Dudley tunnels today. This is Lord Ward's tunnel.
Look, they put the lights on the
Now
top of the
Lord
boat.
Ward was the second Earl of Dudley, and he owned the mineral rights to the surrounding land here. So it was his limestone mine underneath the bridge here. Now Lord Ward was quite a shrewd businessman, and he worked out that if he connected his limestone mines to the emerging canal network, he'd be able to shift an awful lot more limestone. Now we're just going to come up a few drips here ahead of the boat. We're going to nice refreshing drop down the back of your neck. But it gives actual use for those helmets. Keeps a bit of water on you. That's about the wettest part we go through today.
It's okay. Oh!
There we go.
How long is this tunnel?
So just thinking back
Very
to how much limestone you can transport with a horse and cart. Generally it's somewhere in the region of a tonne. But of course if you've got a boat this size, you can move maybe 30 to 40 tonnes in one go. And that's a huge economy of scale. So it was one of the reasons that led to Lord Dudley becoming one of the richest people in the world at the time. Now as we move on through the tunnel here, we can see some of the white calcite deposits building up in the wall.
I saw that. There was a
Essentially
white
that calcite
calcite.
is a type of limescale.
Look, up here.
Something
Look.
similar to what you'd find in your kettle or your washing machine at home.
I'm not going to drop it
And the
though.
reason that stuff builds up on the walls and the ceiling down here is the rainwater coming down through the atmosphere. Leaches some of those minerals out of the rocks as it moves on down towards us.
Look at the ceiling. Look,
And
the
those
drops
minerals get
that have gone
deposited on the
into
walls,
spikes.
leaving behind with limestone a peculiar sort of smoky white coloured deposit. And the brighter or lighter the colour of that deposit, the better the quality of the limestone that's available. Now you can see just up above the boat here, we're moving under one of our construction shafts.
Oh,
We
look.
can show you two of these shafts
How
today.
is it?
It's about 70 feet.
Oh my God.
Shaft.
Whoa.
We're going to come out here into our first open area. This basin is actually known as Churchmill Basin. And it
Look
gives
how black
access here
the soil is over there though.
On the left-hand side of the boat here, we've got the flooded mine, and on the right-hand side of the boat, we've got the Tipton mine.
Oh
These
wow.
mines are differentiated by different engineering types.
There's a mine in there.
Flooded mine there is a surface mine. Gain access to that from the surface and follow the limestone deposit very close to the surface. So it means it's a shallow mine, that one. But the Tipton mine actually connects to a shaft which drops down to about 80 to 100 feet below the level of the canal. So that means we've got an awful lot more of these mine workings up to 100 feet below us. Now as we make this left turn here into Castle Hill Basin,
There's another one over there.
you can see on the right hand side of the
There's
boat
another
we have the
cave.
entrance to the Wren's Nest Tunnel. Now the Wren's Nest Tunnel actually gives access through the ridge, via a distance of about 3/4 of a mile, to the backside of the Seven Sisters mine.
Oh, wow.
Now the Seven Sisters mine, again, was a drift mine, accessed from the surface, and as the miners worked their way into the Seven Sisters, they left 7 huge pillars behind to support the workings. So that's where you get the name of the Seven Sisters. Now the tunnel we're going down at this point is our 1989 tunnel, more affectionately known as the Waffle Tunnel, if you like.
Look at the ceiling, look.
The texture and the shape that we have inside the portal here.
Look at the waffle shape.
Now as we work our way further into
Put some syrup on it, yeah.
the rock becomes more substantial, so it doesn't
Look,
leave
look,
this
look at
constant
the
line.
drippy bits, look.
We do, however, have a very thin layer of concrete sprayed onto the rock here to retain any of those loose chippings that might work their way away from the surface.
We're in a tunnel. Look, this duck.
Now this
Ceiling's getting a bit close, look. Keep your arms in.
Mind your hands against the wall, that wall is very abrasive.
Why is there so
You can
many
cut yourself
lines?
quite easily on this when it's concrete. Now, we have noticed earlier today that some of our bats are actually roosting in the tunnel.
Oh, they've got bats.
So I'll hopefully be able to spot those, point them out to you. Our bats like it in here because they enjoy roosting above water under canal bridges and tunnels. And of course this concrete gives them a lovely grippy surface to hang on to. Now John's got his torch up in the ceiling there.
Oh, look,
So
look,
hopefully we'll spot the bats as we go through. There we go.
Oh!
There's probably about 50 of those bats all
Oh my god! Bats!
Now you notice at this
Did
stage,
you see them?
Yeah, I didn't get a shot.
No.
banding around the
I only just caught it on
that
camera.
actually gives protection for the tunnel in case we get any movement in the ground here, as there's actually a fault line that runs across this tunnel. Fortunately, this spring-loaded barrier actually protected the tunnel back in 2002 when we had our last earthquake down here.
Oh my god. Look, Oscar, look at the big screen. We're in a big cave.
Before you can stand up to get a better view, you're more than welcome. Do remember that the boat is on the move, so hold on to the boat.
Even today, just a few miles, floating on multitudes. For hundreds of millions of years, ours was a violent world devoid of life. But around 2 billion years ago, in a warm shallow pool, a tiny single-celled creature developed. A creature that could divide and reproduce itself, and change to meet the challenges of its harsh environment. A creature destined to change the face of the earth,
You have to leave that
the
on.
father and mother of all
It has to stay on.
Is it white or yellow?
Yellow. Whoa. Look on the screen, look.
Shellfish, sea lilies, and giant corals. first colonized the land. Animals followed: insects, scorpions, lizards, and giant dragonflies. When they died, their remains sank into the mud and were in turn recorded in layers of fossilized plant material, which eventually became coal. Many seams of coal were laid down, giving the geological period its name, the Carboniferous. The coal, interspersed with deposits of iron ore, was eventually covered by later rocks and sank many hundreds of feet below the surface. Folding and fracturing of the Earth's crust pushed the deposits of coal and limestone up through the later rocks, and wind and rain over millions of years eroded away these later deposits, leaving Dudley Castle Hill and the nearby Wren's Nest Hill standing proud as we see them today. These hills, with their thick coating of vegetation, remained largely undisturbed as life and eventually man evolved around them. Undisturbed, that is, until human technology took a sudden, dramatic turn. The Industrial Revolution. A revolution driven, engineered, and supported by iron. And iron's production required iron ore, coal to fire the furnace, and limestone as a flux to remove the impurities. Hundreds of millions of years of geology came together to make the Dudley area central to iron production and vital to the Industrial Revolution. Initially, the limestone was quarried from the sides of the hill, and as those deposits were exhausted, deep pits were dug as the miners followed the seams. As they went deeper, it became ever more difficult to raise the stone to the surface. The solution to this problem came in 1778, when the Earl of Dudley, who owned the mines, constructed a canal and tunnel into the hills to connect his mines to the Birmingham Wolverhampton Canal and so to the rapidly expanding network of inland waterways. The tunnel was later extended through the hill, serving the mineral ridgelands on the other side of the ridge and linking the backcountry industries to the riverside. Where the tunnel crossed the limestone cliffs, the rock was hard. Vertical shafts were dug to reach the deeper seams. Branch canals, tramways, and building walls were constructed and then brought out by boat to
Look, that's how you push with your legs, look. That's how they used to have to push through.
were created with pick and shovel and gunpowder. Massive pillars of rock behind to support the roof. In a few moments, we will enter one of those caverns. Above us, the surface, 80 feet below us, and now flooded, lie yet more man-made caverns. Today, the tramways are silent, and the limestone boats are gone. But let us spare a thought for the black country miners who carved out these caverns 200 years ago. Danger was their constant companion, and not all returned alive to the surface.
So we've got a brief list of the miners here on the screen that did actually meet their deaths during the mine workings down here. Also some brief explanations of the circumstances that led to their deaths. Unfortunately, on average, 4 miners a month would lose their lives in these mine workings, and many thousands were injured over the years.
Bye, put the light on.
So much so that the local magistrate actually forced Lord Dudley to build a local hospital, and that was called the Dudley Guest Hospital, and that would deal with the very many injuries that were caused down here in the mines. Now behind the screen that we were just looking at there lies an entrance to the Dark Cavern, or alternatively known as the 144 Cavern, because there are 144 steps that gave access into that cavern. Indeed, that cavern was so huge, you could put St Paul's Cathedral inside it and still have plenty of room.
Oh my God.
But in the 1850s, up to a couple of thousand people at a time were entertained in the evening in that cavern. Now, as we move on down here through Rock Tunnel, which incidentally used to be a tramway rather than a flooded canal, and it connected the singing cavern ahead of us to the little test caverns that we've just come from. You can see on the walls down here we've got some quite incredible build-up of this calcite deposit, which leads to us having ribbons, curtains, and also stalactites dropping down from the ceiling here. And something peculiar about the stalactites we have here is they're actually hollow on the inside. So they're known as straw stalactites. And if they're broken or chipped off, the water will actually run down the inside of those stalactites. Rather than conventionally, you'd expect that the water runs down the outside. Now, so we're coming up to the largest cavern we can actually show you today. This is the singing cavern. Now, the miners gave the cavern the name of the singing cavern because the wind used to access this cavern, and it would whistle around the supporting pillars in here, creating a humming or singing noise. So that's how the miners came to give the cavern the name of the singing cavern.
Oh my God.
We do actually have a little black here.
We're in a massive cavern, look.
I got to confess, I got so carried away with the box, I forgot to turn on the lights. So I'll just pop back to the switch here. There we go. First big mistake of the day today. Now we've got a sound and light show that's going to go off in here for you. So you're welcome to take pictures and you'll probably get better results without your flash. You're welcome to stand up and have a look around, but again, do remember the boat is moving, so make sure you're staying there nice and safe whilst you're standing.
Wow. Oh my God, look.
Now the sound with this show doesn't seem to be working at the moment. Have you got any ideas why the sound might not be on, John? Press the start button on the barrier.
Oh wow, look. Look up there, Oscar, look.
Where's the light?
Look up there. Can you imagine having to go up there?
Ah, there we go, the sound's catching up with us.
Limestone was quarried here on Dudley Castle Hill for hundreds of years, but the arrival of the canal prompted a rapid increase in mining activity, and at its peak, the Dudley mines produced over 100,000 tons of limestone a year. The extraction of the stone left behind a network of vast caverns, which became an attraction for scientists, engineers, and visiting dignitaries from abroad. The Dudley Caverns have also played an important role in the development of the science of geology and became renowned internationally for the quality and diversity of the fossils that have been discovered. 1850s, the cabins were open to the public. Gas lighting was installed, cars laid out, and a bandstand constructed. Many fetes and concerts were held in these mines, with entertainment provided by orchestras, choirs, and military bands. Coloured fairs were played, and demonstrations of blasting were carried out. Those events were perhaps the forerunner of today's classical spectacular concerts. And although some of the mines were accessible from the surface, many visitors came by canal boat, just as you have today. Since those times, technology has moved on, and we no longer have to risk the dangers of gas and gunpowder to provide light and sound. But imagine for a moment the awe and amazement of those early visitors as we present our modern interpretation of those events nearly 200 years ago.
Up behind the back of the boat here, you can see that we've got some metal shuttering. That's actually blocking the access of this cabin to the outside world. But beyond that shuttering, there's actually a gorge up there that runs about another 100 feet up to the true surface level. Now, there would have originally been a tramway that ran down that gorge and into the top gallery here. The miners would have followed the limestone deposit along through the top gallery, probably for about half a mile into the ridge. Now, once they'd actually excavated that top gallery, the miners would then come back into the cabin here and work their way on down through what was the floor.
No, you stay here.
And work their way down to the level that we're at today. Along the way down, they leave these immense pillars behind that support the ceiling. Each of these pillars weighs somewhere between 300 and 400 tons, and there's 6 of them, all in all, supporting the cabin here. Quite amazing, actually, the 90-degree angle that we do have here between the pillar and this main sloping wall. I think that was a trial of process and error. It was a process of trial and error to work out how much stone to leave behind to support the cabin. Now, once the guys are working through on this level with the limestone deposits, They're going to go about another 3/4 of a mile ahead of us into the ridge. Now that actually takes us out beyond Dudley Zoo and even on towards the college today. Once that limestone deposit on this level is worked out, the guys knew that they could find raw limestone here. So what they did was they added side passages here onto the cavern. Now these side passages connect to vertical shafts which drop down about 80 to 100 feet below us. So you can imagine there's actually another cavern this size around about 100 feet below us.
Oh my God.
So that's our Shhhhing cavern. And of course what we still like to do in here today is have musical events. Our most recent one, on Midsummer's Night, we actually had a sound bath down here on the dock. We had a performer, and she had large gongs, sound bowls, and also a huge one as well. So she performed for about 40 people here on the dock. They were all arranged on blow-up mattresses in their sleeping bags. I'm sure a few of them probably fell asleep during the performance, but they all come out saying they thoroughly enjoyed themselves. Now we do like to host musical events in here. We're certainly hoping to have a choir back at Christmas, and we do have a musical event coming up in the next couple of months. So do keep in touch on the website to see when that becomes available. Moving back down here into the 1984 tunnel. You can see here we have an unlined section. We don't have a shot route on this part of the tunnel, so it allows you to see the full-on construction process here. This egg box concrete construction was made in a factory and then shipped to site, bolted into position to support the tunnel. So what it does, it actually creates a complete tube here that we're floating through. And we're in about 3 or 4 foot of water here. So if you were to find yourself outside the boat, the safest thing to do would be to stand up. Now, of course, in 1984, there was a children's telly programme called Blue Peter. And we were lucky enough, back in 1984, Simon Groom, one of the presenters, came down to open the tunnel for us. So of course, as part of that process, we get ourselves a Blue Peter badge presented. And the Blue Peter badge is still on the wall at the end of the tunnel here today. So we're very proud of that historic commemoration. There we go.
But there's the Blue Peter badge.
Now as we come out from the 84 tunnel there, we're under a section called the well. Because of course it looks a lot like a well. Down at the bottom here, looking up, what you would imagine is the surface. But of course the surface is about another 100 feet higher than the top of the well. And that's today, it's actually surrounded by the local nature reserve up there.
There's more over here.
Now you can see we've got a shovel monument just at the ahead of the boat there with the light.
Go and look.
Now that's to commemorate the incredible service that our volunteers have put into these tunnels and caverns over the years. At times they've done very dangerous and dirty jobs to be able to get these caverns into a state that we can show them to you today. And just as we're manoeuvring there, you can also see the entrance to the Dudley Tunnel itself. That's the continuation of the tunnel, and it carries on for about another 1.5 miles through the ridge, popping out the other side at the Parkhead Locks. Incidentally, today, where the Merry Hill Shopping Centre is constructed down there used to be an iron and steel works, so that was very convenient for Lord Dudley to get his limestone out to those iron and steel works through his new tunnel, and that was in 1792. Now just at dockside here we've got a mock-up of the daily workings of one of the caverns down here.
It's moving.
This is Hurst Cavern, and the guy on dockside here, we know him as Arthur. Now, it's Arthur's job to load all of that loose limestone into the waiting boat here at dockside. Arthur would be doing that for probably 12, maybe 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. And he'd probably be loading 3, 4, or maybe even 5 boats every day. But of course, Arthur can't do that all on his own, so he's got a couple of buddies over by the back wall there. We affectionately know this too as Auntie Deck. Now, what Auntie Deck are up to over there, they're driving a steel bar into the rock face. And the object of that is that they're going to dig themselves a hole big enough to fill with some gunpowder. The cheapest gunpowder that these guys can get their hands on. Because of course these miners are supplying all their own tools, all their own equipment. So once they've got themselves a hole there, they're going to fill it up with gunpowder, going to put a very cheap homemade fuse into the end of the hole, and then seal it up with some clay. And then once they're happy that they've got enough charges placed in the wall, what they'll do is they'll pull the foreman down.
Get ready to blast! Stand clear!
So on that instruction, all the miners are going to leave the mine, but they leave one behind. And that's our little Billy here. Now Billy could be as young as 9 years old. He's sat down here in the dark, he's got a candle in his hand, and he's going to light a homemade fuse that's connected to some really cheap plastic gunpowder. What could possibly go wrong? Now that fuse hopefully is going to burn its way to the charge in the wall. But because it is a full quality fuse, it's going to go out several times before it gets there. So Billy's job is to get out from underneath that cart that he's sheltering below and go and relight that fuse. Of course, every time he relights the fuse, he's closer and closer to that blast face. So it's a really dangerous job for a 9-year-old boy.
Clear!
Now that's good news. We can hear that Dylan's having a good cough there, so he survived that latest explosion. Now you can imagine that cavern. There's going to be full of flying lumps of rock, little chippings, dust and smoke, and it all gets into the miners' eyes. It gets into their lungs as well. So after about 10 years of working down here in the mines, these guys have got very little lung capacity. It's hard for them to breathe, so they can't move very quickly. And even if they could move, they can't see very well. So that's another one of the reasons why the youngest fellas were left behind to set off those explosives. Now we're just moving under the second construction shaft that we can show you today. It's quite interesting because we've got some calcite deposits in there. It's made up of 4 main colours, the limestone being white, the iron oxide is a sort of orangey red colour, and then you've got grey and black deposits in there that indicate the clay and the coal that's also available. And that's the rainwater again, filtering through the rocks and bringing those deposits down the shaft. We get some lights back on there, there we go. Now, you can see we've got some bottles here arranged along the supporting walls. So the story of the message in the bottle goes back to some tunnel enthusiasts who were lurking around in the tunnels here back in the 1960s, the early 1960s. Now, one of these tunnel explorers saw some footprints in the mud that he didn't recognise. So he put the original message in the bottle to communicate with whoever else was making their way around in the tunnels down here. Now eventually, these two guys get together, along with a few friends, and that becomes the inception of the original Preservation Society that started here in 1964. So that was 60 years last year, the anniversary of that original Preservation Society, and hence we ended up with 60 messages in a box arranged along the wall there. Now we're coming out under the cathedral arch here. As you can hear by the echo, hopefully the name gives credence to the part of the cathedral arch. Now you can see also we have a serial tunnel on the left-hand side of the boat here. That was the original tunnel that gained access to the mines underneath the ridge here. But of course, due to subsidence in the lower levels, that tunnel collapsed many years ago. And that led to the construction of both our new tunnels in 1984 and 1989. It was so much cheaper and safer to actually construct new tunnels than it would have been to try and resurrect the original tunnel. But happily, those two new tunnels do give us a lovely circular route underneath the bridge. So it gives us a lovely tour to be able to give you today. Now at this point you can actually see some of the brickwork on the lining in the tunnel here. It's of odd shapes, it's not all regular sized bricks. And that's because these bricks were actually made by hand by the wives and the families of the miners and the bricklayers down here. Now those bricks got damaged over the years by a process called barging, which was a matter of stabbing a pole with a metal spike into the brickwork and then using that pole to propel the boat down along the tunnel. The barging caused so much damage over the years that it was actually banned as a process, and that led to the process of legging, which took two people laying on their backs on a plank across the boat with their feet up on the walls to be able to move the boat on down through the tunnel. Now, if anyone fancies to go out legging, we do actually have a plank in the middle of the boat. So do we have any volunteers today to do some legging for us? Oh, it's all gone very quiet, isn't it? So no volunteers today. No problem, that's okay. So, as I was saying, it would take two guys on their backs with their feet against the wall to move the boats on through these tunnels. Now the full length of the Dudley Tunnel is just under 2 miles. And it could take a pair of leggers as long as 3 or 4 hours to work their way through the whole length of these tunnels. Now you'd imagine that is quite an energetic job. But of course it was a much better lifestyle than the miners. Because of course the leggers managed to get out of the tunnels on several occasions during the day. Once they worked their way through to run in with their current load, the next stage for them would be to run back up across the ridge, right away from Dudley Town Centre to the start of the tunnel and pick up another load. Now the profession of legging, didn't really pay that well. It was around about 12 to 16p per load. It wasn't the worst of wages, but it wasn't the best. But you can see that the leggers would have lived a longer lifespan than the miners. The miners' average age expectancy would have been about 27. But we do actually have a record of one of our professional leggers who actually retired at the age of 73, would you believe? And the really interesting thing about this guy, called Jack Wheeler, was that he could leg a boat through the tunnel on his own. He would actually lay on top of the load, and he would leg with his feet on the roof of the tunnel. But of course the profile of the tunnel changes quite radically as you work your way through the Dudley Tunnel. So Jack had to be very aware of that changing profile. If he got it wrong, if he forgot where he was in the tunnel, he could end up crashing himself. But happily Jack knew that tunnel so well, he survived, as I say, to retire at the age of 73. Now you can see, I think it's another tunnel over here on the right-hand side of the boat. That's the entrance to the Wren's Nest Tunnel. Now the Wren's Nest Tunnel goes about 3/4 of a mile into the ridge there. to the back of the Seven Sisters mine. The Seven Sisters was a drift mine accessed from the surface, and as the miners worked their way into the Seven Sisters cavern, they left 7 enormous pillars behind, similar to what we saw in the Shhhhing cavern, but these pillars were much bigger because they were supporting far more stone inside the Seven Sisters. But of course, you got 7 pillars there, and they end up with the name of Seven Sisters. Now we're just coming past our fossil wall here on the left-hand side of the boat, and just briefly to let you know that in that fossil wall alone, there are about 500 individual fossils. All sorts of things. Sea creatures, crustaceans, shellfish, and even coral. And out of those 500 fossils that you can see in the wall there, 70 types of those are only found locally in the Dudley area. So of course in Victorian times, when the Victorians wanted to collect these fossils and display them on their mantelpiece at home, it meant there was another line of revenue for these miners. If they managed to find themselves a fossil that they could sneak out of the mine and sell, they might make themselves a week or even a month's money in one go. And of course, if they found themselves something as big as a trilobite, they could actually earn themselves maybe the equivalent of a year's wages. So it was a big risk, because if they got caught smuggling those fossils out of the mine, of course that would be instant dismissal, and they'd never have a job to come back to here. But certainly, probably well worth taking that risk for maybe a year's wages in one go. Now you can see as we come back through Shhhhing Basin here,
Sit down.
the 2 mines that we were talking about earlier, the flooded mine over on the left-hand side, and the Tipton mine on the right there. Well, what we do actually have in the basin here is we have a badger set about halfway up the slope here. Now we were lucky enough to get 3 cubs produced from that badger set last year. And what we do is we keep some wildlife cameras focused on the basin here, so that hopefully we can get some entertaining shots of these guys. Because of course they don't move around during the day, they're nocturnal. They come out at night to forage and have a bit of a rough and tumble with each other. So once we get some of that interesting footage, we'll have that up on the website to have a look at. So we're going back under the shirts, we're constructing the shaft here. We also know this one as the Eiffel Tower, because of course when you look up there, you're going to get an eyeful of whatever's coming down. Now as we move on down through the tunnel here, you can see we've got some square holes that have been left in the tunnel wall. Now originally, those holes were actually used for supporting scaffolding and a wooden former, which gave the shape of the ceiling of the tunnel. The bricks would be laid up on top of that wooden former, and then once they're set, the former and the scaffolding would be removed. But it left these holes in the wall, and the holes actually had a second purpose. That's because they're known as weep holes. And what they would do is prevent any rainwater from building up pressure behind the brickwork. That rainwater would work its way up through these weep holes, as you can see by the calcite deposits that stream down the walls from some of these holes. So of course that's another thing that protected the integrity of these tunnels. And it's quite amazing how good a condition they are after 200 odd years. Now limestone of course does have very many applications out there in the world. It's a strong enough stone to make buildings out of, to create statues, and even construct roads. But most of the limestone taken out of these mines was put into local lime kilns, and those have been dotted around the locality. The lime kiln will actually be filled with wood and coal at the bottom, and then stacked up with that limestone on the top. Find out the drips as we come along the tunnel here. So, the coal and the wood would be lit, and that fire would burn for a couple of weeks. The heat of the fire would actually break down the limestone into a powder that then could be used for lime wash, for painting walls. It could be used within lime water for brickwork, to join the brick together. So there are many applications for that limestone once it was excavated. And certainly that was one of the factors that led to Lord Dudley, as we were saying earlier, becoming one of the richest men in the world at the time. Now, so we're approaching back to the daylight. You can imagine the relief those miners must have had after a long shift down there in the dark, emerging back out into the daylight. And thankfully that rain's actually stopped for us, so it's a much more entertaining afternoon. Now at this point, both John and myself would like to thank you for coming along today, because every one of you that rides on the boats with us makes a valuable contribution to the history and the upkeep here of the Trust. Long may it continue, and thank you for that. Now we might have a couple of bumps as we get ourselves alongside the dock here. Things will board up safely, we'll get you off the boat.